I bought ground beef for €2.99, chicken breast for €2.79, and this salami I got for €1.39. How can meat be so cheap? Well, I've already had a look at intensive livestock farming and the suffering it can mean for animals. But what about the people working in the meat industry? At Germany's biggest pork slaughterhouses, up to 30,000 pigs are slaughtered, cleaned, and packaged every day. Workers report extremely demanding conditions, both physically and mentally. It's cold, and there is a lack of natural light. The workers have to be extremely careful so that they don't cut or stab themselves. Metal gloves are supposed to help prevent that from happening, but accidents occur nonetheless.
If the knives become dull, you can only work the meat by using a lot of force. And then the next pig arrives and you need force again, because it's impossible to work with those dull knives. I buy myself knives now and again, but that's never enough either.
It's outrageous the company doesn't provide some of the things they should. They make promises, but usually everything is delayed.
The workers in the production line are often not employed by the slaughterhouse directly. Many come from Eastern Europe and work for subcontractors. That's not surprising. After all, EU citizens are permitted to work in any other EU country. But the wages in Western Europe are much higher than in the East. The subcontractors get a fixed price for slaughtering and butchering a certain number of pigs, and reports suggest that subcontractors often end up exploiting workers in order to turn a profit. They try to save where they can on one of the most costly factors for meat producers: labor. We talked to Michael Andritsky from the Food Industry Association, which represents the German meat industry.
The German meat industry has very strong competitors: Poland, Brazil, and Asia for the poultry industry, and Spain and China for the pig sector. In all those countries, the labor costs are much lower than in Germany. So the price for labor is very important.
German law says all workers must be paid the minimum wage. And what is that? Well, €9.19 per hour in 2019 and €9.35 in 2020. But workers say many subcontractors don't play by the rules.
The worst thing is that you realize that they keep the money for themselves instead of paying fair salaries to the employees.
I came here to work. I don't care how much I have to work at the production line. As long as I get paid, in the end, my effort is worth it. If my work is not valued and paid for, then I'll speak openly to my boss. I was told 3 times that if I don't like something, I can go. He said he would help me write my resignation.
Sometimes the payment at the end of the month is even zero. We saw one payslip saying the whole salary was withheld due to unspecified contractual penalties. A recent investigation by Germany's most popular state, North Rhine-Westphalia, into the meat industry criticized a number of practices. They include unpaid hours, unpaid holiday pay, shifts exceeding 16 hours a day, and lack of safe and adequate work tools.
People are under so much pressure. They are totally unhappy and broken people. All you do is work, go home and sleep, and then return to work where you feel miserable. Some workers would faint very often on the production lines because of exhaustion. Others would get injured. They would be taken aside and an ambulance would come to collect them.
Piotr Mazurek provides counseling to Eastern European migrant workers. Most of his clients work in the meat industry.
The working conditions in the meat industry are one of the most precarious. As long as we have subcontractors in such a big extent, in this branch we will have the problems.
Employees and unions criticize the meat industry's reliance on subcontractors. So why do big companies stick to it?
The contract companies have the connections to the East European labor markets. It's very difficult for German companies to hire workers directly in their home countries. The East European workers, they trust their own companies which hire them in their home countries and then make the contract here with the slaughterhouses.
But trust is lacking among the workers we talked to, both in their employers but also in the German labor laws intended to protect workers. Professor Stefan Greiner is an expert on German labor law. He says the problem is not with the laws themselves, but that too few controls are carried out.
Such subcontractors are, more often than not, economically weak companies. It's necessary here to ensure that existing regulations are observed and implemented. We don't have a problem with the regulations. We have a problem with the lack of control.
The number of federal inspections has actually decreased by 60% between 2009 and 2018. But when inspections do take place and are done properly, they have uncovered unscrupulous practices. The investigation in Germany's North Rhine-Westphalia examined the working conditions in large slaughterhouses with thousands of employees. In 26 of the 30 companies tested, there were breaches of labor regulations. In reaction to this investigation, the state's Minister of Labor said, "Foreign contract workers are particularly affected. They already struggle to make use of their rights due to language barriers. We cannot and do not want to see how foreign workers in our country are exploited and how illegal structures undermine fair competition." The harsh working conditions contribute to an environment where many workers don't stay long. It's a system that is in constant demand for new people, and so far, there are still enough people willing to start working in these jobs, even if it means some end up physically or mentally unable to keep doing the work. But is there a clear path towards better labor practices? Well, we visited a slaughterhouse which claims to do things differently. And indeed, instead of giving all the responsibility to subcontractors, they employ their own workforce. That's a characteristic shared by only 2 of the 30 companies that investigators say can be rated as comparatively good.
The thing is value to the meat and value to our employees. But if someone says it's only possible to work with subcontractors living normally in Poland, in Romania or in Hungary, that's silly. It's only much cheaper.
However, the meat that is produced in this facility is also more expensive than the meat coming from the big slaughterhouses. Well, for consumers, it can be very difficult to find out about the conditions under which a particular meat product was produced. But one thing is clear: cheap meat is often made possible by cheap labor, and that can be linked to questionable labor practices. Possibly something to keep in mind for grocery shoppers who are concerned about how their food is produced.